You know, there's this idea that became very popular in the 1960s. I just talked to a bishop. I told him that I was a strange psychologist because I never told my audiences that, and I always speak to individuals in the audience, I never tell someone that they're okay the way they are. You know, there's this idea that came up in the 60s that you're okay the way you are. Well, I like that idea very much. And I think it's a very bad idea, especially when you're talking to young people who are lost and nihilistic and depressed and suffering and aimless and ideologically possessed and prematurely cynical. Because they're not okay the way they are. And if you tell them that they are, then they think, well, this is it, that's life. It's like I've hit the pinnacle at 18. I don't know anything about the world. I haven't contributed anything to it. But there's no up because I'm okay the way they are, the way I am. It's like, you're not okay the way you are, especially if you're 18. You've got 60 years to put yourself together, and you better be better at the end of that than you were at the beginning, or something has gone seriously wrong. And so it's not an optimistic thing to tell people that they're okay the way they are. It's a pessimistic thing, because what you do is denigrate what they could be for what they are. And I know that is a terrible idea, technically speaking, from a psychological perspective, because it's who you could be that imbues your life with meaning. It's not the only thing. I mean, you have your friends and your family, but they expect something from you too, you know? They expect the best from you. They expect a certain amount of improvement, especially if you have children. But even if you are a child, you might expect some improvement from your parents as well. But that's what you hope for, is you hope that the person can manifest what's best in them. And if they don't do that, then you're disappointed in them, just like you would be inexorably or are inexorably disappointed in yourself if you don't manifest what's best in you. And I think that that's a very interesting moral law. I've been talking a lot to the crowds that I've been talking to, not about rights, but about responsibility, right? Because you can't have the bloody conversation. What are you doing? You can't have the conversation about rights without the conversation about responsibility, because your rights are my responsibility. That's what they are, technically. So you just can't have only half of that discussion. And we're only having half that discussion. And the question is, well, what the hell are you leaving out if you only have that half of the discussion? And the answer is, well, you're leaving out responsibility. And then the question is, well, what are you leaving out if you're leaving out responsibility? And the answer might be, well, maybe you're leaving out the meaning of life. That's what it looks like to me. It's like, here you are, suffering away. What makes it worthwhile? Rights? You know, you're completely out. You have no idea what it's almost impossible to describe how bad an idea that is. Responsibility. That's what gives life meaning. It's like lift a load. Then you can tolerate yourself, right? Because look, you're useless, easily hurt, easily killed. Why should you have any self-respect? That's the story of the fall. Pick something up and carry it. Make it heavy enough so that you can think, yeah, well, useless as I am, at least I could move that from there to there. Well, what's really cool about that is that when I talk to these crowds about this, the men's eyes light up. And that's like I've seen that phenomenon because I've been talking about this mythological material for a long time. And I can see when I'm watching crowds, people, you know, their eyebrows lift, their eyes light up because I put something together for them. And that's what mythological stories do. So I'm not taking responsibility for that. That's what the stories do. So I say the story and people go click, 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 you know, and their eyes light up. But this responsibility thing, that's a whole new order of this, is that young men are so hungry for that, it is unbelievable. I talk a lot to my audiences about what I believe to be incontrovertible facts. And I think that the fundamental incontrovertible fact is that life is suffering. And I think that that's why that's a primary axiom of religious belief, in some sense almost regardless of the faith, that life is suffering. And everyone knows that, although they don't necessarily like to admit it or to talk about it. I mean, you don't have to scrape beneath the surface very far in someone's life to find a tragedy lurking if the person that you're speaking with doesn't have something pretty awful happening to them right at the moment, economically or socially or within their family or physically or mentally. The probability that someone they love has a problem of that sort is extraordinarily high. And if you happen to be among the fortunate minority for whom that isn't true, well, all you have to do is wait, and it will be true soon enough, and sooner than you think, and worse than you imagine. And everyone knows that. And so it's easy to understand why people become cynical and bitter and hurt and nihilistic. Now, I think there's a progression in life. You know, if you're naive, you think that life will be easy and that people are basically good, and then you have some experiences if you're not sheltered too much, and that gets taken away from you because you betray yourself or other people betray you, or you encounter a tragedy, and then your naivety is shattered, and the most likely place that you'll go from there is into something approximating cynicism, because you don't know the alternative, and your initial faith, which was not faith but naivety, is shattered by the terrible reality of what you encounter. And then as a cynical person, you're more wise than you are as a naive person. And that's a strange thing, because you're worse in some sense than you were. You know, you're not as optimistic, and you're not as filled with hope, and your life is more difficult. And you're probably harder on other people and with more of a tendency towards cruelty. And none of that seems positive, but there's a wisdom in cynicism that the naive lack. But the problem is there that cynicism is not a useful antidote to, let's say, tragedy and malevolence, because there are places that you go past cynicism as you approach wisdom, and it's wisdom that you need in order to fabricate yourself this sort of vessel that will keep you afloat during stormy times. And so I believe that people are stronger than their misfortunes. I believe that if you turn around and confront the vulnerability that's part and parcel of life, you'll find within yourself a strength that will transcend that. And I believe that not only to be true, but supported by the best clinical evidence. And that it's important for lost young people, male and female alike, to develop a vision and take on some responsibility and understand that they have a vital role to play in the world, that the lack of their best hurts everything. And I think that's true. And the sad thing is that there's very many people who have not heard an encouraging word in their life. And it takes so little to encourage them that it's rather tragic. You know, I have people come up to me, and I mean by all the time, I mean many people every day in the lectures and on the street who tell me, I was in a bad place, I was struggling, I've been watching your lectures, I've been reading your book, I've put my life together, I'm trying to be responsible, tell the truth, things are way better, thank you. And so that's, can't get any better than that. Maybe if you put yourself together enough, carefully enough, spoke the truth enough, were courageous enough, in spite of the reasons you have not to be, that you could also be someone of benefit to yourself and your family and your community, and you partake in structuring things in a harmonious manner by living in that way. It's not an individual focused ethos. It's an ethos of harmony among levels. You should do what's good for you, but it has to be what's good for your family at the same time, and it has to be what's good for you and your family and your community at the same time. And that works musically, you know, it makes all the levels work in harmony. And you can tell when that's happening. And this is another thing that's of great utility to know, is that when you're in that place where you're acting in the proper manner and you're facing things courageously and you're speaking the truth, you're imbued with a sense of fundamental meaning. And that meaning is the antidote to the catastrophe of life. And it's the antidote psychologically, because you have to have that meaning, because otherwise your life is too dark and too dreadful and it will corrupt you. And if we accept our responsibility to ourselves and to other people and to our communities, and we lift that load up, then we live lives that are meaningful, and that stops us from being corrupt. It provides us with a medication against catastrophe, and it also practically improves the world. Thank you.